this week on Choice Hacking. Founded in 1902 by James Cash Penney, probably the greatest name for an entrepreneur ever, J.C. Penney was once the biggest retailer in the United States and the gold standard of American retail. For nearly 100 years, every town in America seemed to have a J.C. Penney, and almost everything people needed could be found on its shelves or in its famous catalog. J.C. Penney wasn't just big, it was an innovator. It paved the way for modern brand partnerships when they worked with the legendary fashion designer Halston to create a more accessible version of his upscale brand. Sam Walton was inspired to found Walmart after working at J.C. Penney in the 1940s. But by 2011, they were in serious trouble. Hit hard by a few recessions, Penney's was run down and worn out. They needed a miracle. And to try and find one, their board did something surprising. They hired Ron Johnson to lead the company. Now, you might remember his name from episode 303 of this podcast. Johnson worked with Steve Jobs as Apple's head of retail to invent the Apple Store. Ron Johnson was a first-time CEO, but he was also a retail superstar after running store experience for Apple and for Target. On the surface, it was a bold, interesting move. Unfortunately, it turned out to be a fatal mistake. I'm Jennifer CLINEHENS, and you're listening to Choice Hacking, a podcast about applying behavioral science and psychology to business, marketing, experience design, and more. Join me today as we unpack the psychology behind one of the biggest marketing fails of all time, the rebrand of J.C. Penney's. What we can learn and what we can avoid so we don't make the same fatal missteps that Penney's did. But first, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this podcast, Choice Hacking Training. Did you know that Choice Hacking isn't just a podcast? We're also an e-learning platform, a marketing consulting firm, and we do a lot of corporate training that can get your teams using the power of behavioral science, psychology, and AI to drive your bottom line. We can help your employees learn the nuts and bolts of applied behavioral science, become more persuasive presenters using psychology and predictive AI, and even polish their leadership skills with the power of evidence-based approaches. Sound interesting? Just visit choicehacking.com/training to learn more. That's choicehacking.com/training. Now on to the show. When Ron Johnson was announced as the new CEO of J.C. Penney, he didn't waste any time. He kicked off his work with a major rebrand, starting with its logo and its name. J.C. Penney became JCP, with a stylish, minimalistic, and some might say Apple-like logo. Johnson then refreshed the look and feel of JCP's stores to try and attract younger shoppers. He replaced JCPenney's well-known store brands with 100 smaller boutiques, partnering with brands like upmarket beauty retailer Sephora. And on the surface, this might have made sense, but Ron Johnson missed something very important about the psychology of JCPenney's most loyal customers. The people that loved JCPenney's were lower middle-class women, basically moms, who wanted to snag a deal on clothes and homewares. By creating a retail experience that looked, sounded, and felt very different than what they were used to, Johnson alienated JCP's core customers. The psychology behind this is something called the self-reference effect. It says that people resonate with experiences that reflect how they see themselves. And if you don't think of a store as, quote, a place where people like me would shop, you don't want to go in. This is such an important measure that many major brands track customer sentiment and response to some form of the question, is this brand a place for people like you? After millions of dollars worth of renovations, JCP core customers didn't think of themselves as JCP customers anymore. And younger customers didn't like the new JCP because it still had the reputation of being the uncool place where your grandma shopped to find a bargain. JCPenney was a discount destination. Their customers were bargain hunters. Knowing that they might miss out on a sale gave customers a reason to visit the store on a regular basis. But Johnson thought sales killed brands because it made them feel cheap, which can certainly be true. Just look at the demise of retail brands like The Gap or Banana Republic, who promoted themselves straight into the bargain bin. To avoid a fate like this, Johnson got rid of all the discounts and introduced what he called fair and square pricing. It did away with the typical sales and instead only had 3 types of prices in the store. First were everyday prices, so these were prices that never changed. Second were month-long values. These were theme sales for certain times of the year, like back-to-school clothes going on sale in August. Last were best prices, basically another phrase for clearance items. In theory, the simplicity of this is beautiful. It didn't overwhelm customers or make them feel like they should wait for a sale to buy anything. But the problem was, Johnson overlooked the power of price perception. You see, pricing isn't just math. It's a psychological game. And the prices you use aren't just numbers. They tell a story about your brand. It's all about how customers feel when they see a price or a sale. And Penny's customers really wanted to feel like they had saved money, even if they hadn't. Markdowns made them feel good because of a psychological principle called anchoring. Anchoring says that our decisions are influenced by the very first information we see. Our brains grab onto that information without being consciously aware that we're doing it. In other words, when we see a blouse that was $60 and it's marked down to $15, we feel like we're getting a deal, even if we're not. It's because we're comparing $15 to $60, not thinking about $15 objectively. And feeling like they got a good deal was more important to JCPenney's customers than actually getting a deal. One other small but really important thing that fair and square pricing did was to take the 99 off the end of every price. So instead of a sweater that cost $15.99, now it cost $15. Now this might seem like a tiny thing, but studies show that prices that end in odd numbers, like 99, are more appealing because they make the price feel like more of a bargain. And that is especially true for value products. It's why you'll see a can of tomatoes for $1.99 at Walmart, but you will never, ever see an Hermes Birkin bag on sale for $29,999.99. That 99 cents makes a product feel cheap, for better or for worse. It's down to a psychological pricing strategy called odd-even pricing. Odd-even pricing has been proven to increase demand for many types of products. But while a price ending in 99 makes something feel cheap, the opposite is also true. So when a JCP sweater that was $15.99 is now $15, subconsciously it feels more expensive, even though it's cheaper. And that was a problem for Penny's value-driven customers. Ron Johnson based most of his JCP strategy on what had worked at Apple. He might have been a superstar at Apple, but he seemed unwilling to acknowledge that JCPenney and Apple were 2 very different companies with different customers and different needs. Ron Johnson fell victim to a few common thinking traps. First was something called the false consensus effect. It says that we see our own behavior and beliefs as more common than they actually are. So people who read the New York Times might think that 60% of America reads the New York Times, while non-readers might guess that only 10% of Americans are New York Times readers. Now, this effect can be compounded in group situations, like making decisions inside of a company full of people who are paid to agree with you. The company can be even more optimistic that customers think the way that they do because the group's beliefs seem to support this. And next is the hot hand fallacy. It says people think someone is on a hot streak based on their past performance. The hot hand fallacy happens a lot in sports. Let's say Steph Curry starts hitting three-pointers over and over. All of a sudden, everybody thinks he's on a hot streak because he can't miss. But actually making one three-pointer doesn't make you statistically more or less likely to hit the next one, regardless of how it feels in the moment.
Does being on fire feel real to you?
Oh, absolutely. There are times I catch the ball and you maybe made one or two in a row, and this is in practice or a game, whatever the case is. But mostly in the game, like, everything else does not exist. The only thing that exists is as long as I can get this shot off and it's not going to get blocked, the rim feels like the ocean. And it's one of the most rewarding feelings for us. You're not surprised you're in those moments, but when it happens, it's like, yeah, this is what I've been waiting for.
It's like a psychological or physical phenomenon that you can feel. Like this study, they don't know what they're talking about.
They don't know what they're talking about at all. Unless you've been in that 94 feet and you know, like, it's literally the tangible physical sensation of all I need to do is just get this ball off my fingertips and it's going to go in.
And as you can tell from that Hot Ones interview, Steph Curry really feels like hot streaks are real. Ron Johnson's hot streak was pretty good too. Target and Apple are huge brands with cult followings, and he undeniably did a great job with their stores. But a few successes doesn't mean you're more likely to keep winning. You have to test and try new things before you commit, something that Ron Johnson refused to do. He trusted his expertise and his gut. And when people asked why he never tested his ideas at JCPenney, Ron Johnson just said, "We never tested at Apple." Thank you for listening to the Choice Hacking Podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please share it on social media, and it is a huge help when you share an episode with your followers. And don't forget, you can learn more about behavioral science and psychology applied to business when you subscribe to the free Choice Hacking email list. You'll join more than 8,000 brilliant UX, CX, and marketing folks from companies like Google, Coke, and Disney who get my newsletter. To sign up, just visit choicehacking.com/subscribe. That's choicehacking.com/subscribe. Until next time.
I hit record a drop, you can't ignore it. I'm transforming now these cars and planes, I'm always boarding. Just out touring down in Charlotte like I play for Hornets.